Saturday morning, Jerusalem, 33 AD. 11 men are hiding in a locked room, terrified. Every footstep in the street makes them flinch. Their leader is dead, executed like a common criminal just 24 hours before. Peter, the one who swore he'd die for Jesus, denied him 3 times. Judas betrayed him and ended his own life. The others ran. Their movement finished, humiliated, done. But here's what makes zero sense. 50 days later, these same men are standing in the middle of Jerusalem, the same city that just killed their leader, preaching to thousands, not quietly, loudly, fearlessly. Within 30 years, this message explodes from one locked room to 3 continents: India, Rome, Ethiopia, Armenia. Places most of them had never even heard of. So what happened? What turned terrified fugitives into martyrs who wouldn't stop even when Rome put them in the ground? Today, we're tracking the 50 days that defied every rule of human behavior, and the one man who tried to stop it all before accidentally becoming its greatest weapon. Saul of Tarsus wasn't some random religious fanatic. He was a fixer. Think religious enforcer with government authorization. He had official papers from the high priest in Jerusalem giving him legal authority to hunt down Christians and drag them back to stand trial. And he was good at his job. The book of Acts tells us he was there when Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was stoned to death. He approved of it. He held the coats. Saul wasn't conflicted. He believed these Christians were heretics who needed to be stopped before they infected all of Judea. So he gets his papers, assembles a team, and heads to Damascus, about 135 miles north, to shut down the Christian cells there. But something happens on that road. Saul claims he encountered the risen Jesus, not in a dream, not in a vision at night, in the middle of the day, on a public road with witnesses, and it wrecked him. Now here's why this matters. This isn't just a nice conversion story. This is career suicide. Saul had everything: status, safety, a respected position in Jewish society, and he threw it away to join the people he was hunting. Think about that. This would be like an FBI agent who's investigating a cult suddenly joining the cult, and then telling everyone the leader came back from the dead. You don't do that unless you're absolutely convinced. And here's your smoking gun. In one of Paul's letters, 1 Corinthians 15, he quotes an early creed, not something he made up, something he received from the Jerusalem apostles when he met them just 3 to 5 years after the execution. Quote, "Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living." End quote. Most of whom are still living. That's not legend building. That's Paul saying, don't believe me? Go ask them yourself. They're still alive. This creed was circulating within 3 to 5 years of the event. For context, that's faster than most celebrity death conspiracy theories get debunked. This wasn't a story that grew over centuries. It was breaking news, written while eyewitnesses were still walking around. And Paul didn't just believe it. He spent the next 30 years dragging this message across the Roman Empire, shipwrecked, beaten, imprisoned, and eventually executed in Rome. Okay, Paul's story is wild, but what about the original 11? If the resurrection was a lie, they were the ones who knew it. They were the ones who would have hidden the body. They were in the room when it didn't happen. And yet, instead of quietly disappearing and getting on with their lives, they did the opposite. They scattered like shrapnel from an explosion, and they didn't stop talking. Here's what we know from the early church historians like Eusebius, Irenaeus, and Clement of Rome, people writing in the 1st and 2nd centuries when the trail was still warm. Peter, the guy who denied Jesus 3 times to save his own skin, ends up in Rome, the heart of the beast, the capital of the empire that crucified his teacher. Clement of Rome, writing around 95 AD, confirms Peter was martyred there during Nero's persecution alongside Paul. Tradition says he was crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy to die the same way Jesus did. That's not the behavior of a man guarding a secret. That's a man who saw something. Thomas, forever known as Doubting Thomas, because he wouldn't believe without proof, reportedly went east all the way to India. Now, skeptics love to dismiss this as legend, but here's the thing, there are millions of Christians in Kerala, South India, who call themselves St. Thomas Christians. They claim their church was founded by Thomas himself in 52 AD. And their story isn't new, it's been consistent for centuries. You don't get that kind of persistent, localized tradition from a fabricated story. You get it from memory. John, the youngest disciple, sometimes called the Beloved, became the anchor of the church in Ephesus in modern-day Turkey. Irenaeus, who studied under Polycarp, who knew John personally, wrote in the late 2nd century, quote, John, the disciple of the Lord, who also had leaned upon his breast, published a gospel during his residence at Ephesus in Asia, end quote. That's a 2-generation chain of testimony. Irenaeus knew a guy who knew John. This isn't telephone game history, this is traceable. Andrew, Peter's brother, pushed north into Scythia, modern-day Ukraine and Russia, before being martyred in Greece. Matthew, the former tax collector, reportedly took the message to Ethiopia and Persia. James the Greater was executed early, 44 AD, by Herod Agrippa in Jerusalem. He was the first apostle to die. The movement was barely a decade old, and Rome was already killing them. Bartholomew and Thaddeus are credited with evangelizing Armenia, which became one of the first Christian nations in history. Philip ended up in Hierapolis, Turkey. Simon the Zealot and Matthias are linked to North Africa and the Caucasus region. Look at that spread. India, Rome, Armenia, Ethiopia, North Africa, Greece, Turkey. These men didn't have Instagram. They didn't have printing presses. They were walking, sometimes thousands of miles, into hostile territory, with no money, no security, and no way home. And every single one of them faced the same choice: recant and live, or don't and die. Every single one chose death. Here's where sociology backs up history. People die for lies all the time, if they believe the lie is true. Cult members drink the Kool-Aid. Soldiers charge into battle with propaganda. Terrorists blow themselves up for ideology. But here's what doesn't happen. People don't die for lies they invented. If the resurrection was a hoax, these 11 men were hoaxes. They hid the body, they made up the story, they knew it was fake. And yet they chose brutal deaths in foreign countries over comfortable lives at home. Peter, crucified upside down. Thomas, speared to death in India. Andrew, crucified on an X-shaped cross in Greece. James, beheaded in Jerusalem. These men weren't zealots walking into the fire for a cause they believed in. They were eyewitnesses defending an event they claimed to have seen. In legal terms, they're called hostile witnesses, people who have every reason to lie but don't. The Roman Empire offered them a simple deal. Just say it didn't happen and you can go home. Not one of them took it. That's not how liars behave. That's how witnesses behave. In less than 30 years, the message went from a locked room in Jerusalem to the halls of Caesar's household. Paul mentions it clearly in his letter to the Philippians. Quote, "All the saints send you greetings, especially those who belong to Caesar's household." End quote. Think about that. The movement born in a backwater province had infiltrated the imperial court, and the emperor finally noticed. Next week, the Roman reaction. We're diving into Nero's persecution, the blood in the Colosseum, and how trying to drown this fire only made it spread faster. Because here's the irony. When you martyr witnesses, you don't silence them, you make more. I'm Michael, and I'll see you on the ground level.